Both on This Old House and the New Yankee Workshop for years, we have always promoted safety in all aspects of what we do, but most importantly, in eye protection.
For 21 seasons, Norm Abram walked into a small Massachusetts workshop, put on his safety glasses, and built something beautiful right in front of you. No drama, no elimination rounds, no celebrity guests. Just a man, his tools, and a plan. The show was still popular. It was profitable, fully funded, and beloved by millions of loyal viewers who tuned in every single week. So when it ended in 2009, fans weren't expecting it. And the reason Norm walked away, it wasn't what anyone thought. So how did a quiet woodworking show with no drama, no gimmicks, and no celebrity guests become powerful enough that its ending shocked millions? The show that built a generation. To understand why the New Yankee Workshop ended, you first have to understand what it actually was, and just how rare that kind of television really is. The show launched in 1989, created by producer Russell Morash, the same man behind This Old House. Morash had watched Norm Abram work for years as lead carpenter on that show and saw something different in him. Not just skill, patience, clarity. The kind of man who could make a dovetail joint look approachable to someone who had never held a chisel. So Morash built him his own stage, a 936-square-foot workshop tucked behind a Massachusetts farmhouse, stocked with every tool a serious woodworker could want. The format was deceptively simple. Norm would introduce a project, a blanket chest, a shaker side table, a Windsor chair, often visiting a historical landmark tied to that style first. He'd examine the original piece, talk about its construction, then go back to the shop and build it himself. Step by step, no shortcuts, no hired hands doing the hard work off camera. Just Norm, talking through every cut, every joint, every decision. The show ran on PBS with no network pressure to chase ratings through stunts or celebrity appearances. It was the opposite of everything trending on television at the time. And somehow, that's exactly why it worked. Audiences found something genuinely restorative about watching a man who was simply very good at what he did, doing it without pretense. By the early 90s, it had become a Saturday morning institution. Viewers didn't just tune in to learn technique, they tuned in to spend time with Norm. His quiet confidence, his plaid shirt, his safety glasses, the way he reminded you at the top of every episode to protect your eyes. It added up to something television rarely produces: genuine comfort. Over 21 seasons, approximately 235 complete projects were built on screen, from simple shop jigs to elaborate period reproductions, outdoor structures, even a sailing boat. The cultural footprint was real. Woodworking club memberships grew. Tool sales spiked on weekends after new episodes. Instructors credited the show for bringing new students through their doors. Norm hadn't simply hosted a program, he had become, without fanfare, one of the most influential figures in American craft of his generation. But if the show looked that calm and effortless on screen, what was really happening behind the camera to make it all work? The reality behind the camera. What the audience saw was a 22-minute episode. What they didn't see was everything it took to make one. Each project on the New Yankee Workshop required somewhere between 40 and 60 hours of preparation and filming. That meant sourcing and inspecting the right lumber, often specific species in exact dimensions, before a single cut could even begin. It meant designing a build process that would actually work on television, deciding which steps could be shortened and which needed to be shown in full. It meant setting up camera angles, lighting, and tool placement so everything looked seamless on screen. And at the center of all of it, Norm still had to build the piece. That's the part that made this show fundamentally different. Norm wasn't performing carpentry. He was doing it for real, in real time, with real consequences if something went wrong. Every cut viewers saw was his. Every joint was his. And if something didn't fit, he fixed it himself. There were no stand-ins, no off-camera corrections, no second version quietly swapped in. He had one assistant on set, mostly handling cleanup and finishes, but the actual woodworking, the skill viewers tuned in for, belonged entirely to Norm. That authenticity became the soul of the show. People who understood woodworking could see immediately that it was real, and people who didn't understand it could still feel it. There's a difference between watching someone demonstrate something and watching someone truly know what they're doing. Norm had that quiet authority, and it carried every episode. But that authenticity came at a cost. The new Yankee workshop wasn't something Norm did occasionally. During production seasons, it was a full-time commitment, often 40 to 60 hours a week. And at the same time, he was still working on This Old House, filming alongside an entirely separate production schedule. For years, he was essentially doing two demanding television jobs at once. The difference was the weight each role carried. On This Old House, Norm contributed as a master carpenter, important but shared. On the new Yankee workshop, he was everything: the designer, the builder, the teacher, the host. Every episode depended entirely on him showing up and doing the work, start to finish. And then there was the physical environment. The workshop floor was bare concrete. During active filming, Norm stood on it for 8 to 12 hours a day. Not for a few months, but for more than 2 decades. Year after year, season after season, absorbing that impact through his joints, his back, his feet. From the outside, the show felt calm, almost meditative. But inside that workshop, it was relentless. A constant cycle of lifting, cutting, bending, adjusting, and repeating. Norm never showed that strain on camera. He never let the effort break the illusion of ease. But the reality was simple. The very thing that made the show so genuine was also what made it so demanding. And over time, that demand doesn't disappear. And if that level of authenticity came at such a high cost, how much was Norm's body actually paying for it after 2 decades? The physical toll. By 2009, Norm Abram was approaching 60 years old. He had spent 2 decades doing demanding physical labor on camera in a workshop built for craft, not comfort. The effects didn't arrive all at once. They built slowly, year after year, until they became impossible to ignore. Repetitive sawing, chiseling, and sanding, done thousands of times, led to persistent joint pain that grew harder to manage. His back, after years of bending over workbenches and lifting heavy lumber, carried its own strain. And plantar fasciitis, caused by standing for long hours on unpadded concrete, had become a chronic issue. None of this ever showed on screen. That was simply who Norm was. He didn't complain. He didn't let the audience see the cost. The work looked just as careful and unhurried in the final seasons as it did in the first. But behind the scenes, conversations had already begun. Quiet discussions with producer Russell Morash and WGBH about what continuing would actually mean. Because the question wasn't whether the show still worked. It clearly did. The question was what it was costing him to keep it going. And that's what often gets lost when people summarize this story. The physical toll wasn't failure. It was the natural result of doing real work, the same way at a high level for a very long time. Norm had given everything to the show, and eventually his body made it clear that everything had been given. So when the physical toll finally became impossible to ignore, who made the call to end it, and how exactly did it happen? The decision itself. The ending, when it came, was Norm's decision entirely. That point matters and deserves emphasis, because in the years since the show concluded, various rumors circulated.
In the new Yankee workshop, at the beginning of each show, would start to get that message out there.
About feuds behind the scenes, about network pressure, about creative disagreements, or declining viewership. All of it was false. The people closest to the show confirmed it clearly and consistently. There were no external forces pushing Norm out. The show had no enemies. It was not canceled. It was ended, deliberately, thoughtfully. and entirely on Norm's own terms. Norm himself addressed it with characteristic directness. "We've had a great run," he said, "built challenging projects, met wonderful woodworkers, and received loyal support from millions of viewers." That was the whole statement. No grievances, no finger-pointing, just gratitude and a clean acknowledgement that it was time. Russell Morash, who had been with the show from its first day of production and whose backyard workshop had been its home for all 20 seasons, framed the situation simply. The show could not continue without Norm. There was no version of the new Yankee workshop that made sense with anyone else at the workbench. The show was not a format that could be handed to a successor. It was a specific man doing a specific thing in a specific way, and the decision to end it was inseparable from the decision Norm had made about his own life and body. Producer Morash also noted something that rarely gets mentioned in discussions of the show's ending. Norm had unfinished projects of his own home, a timber-framed colonial he had built himself in Carlisle, Massachusetts, had things he had always intended to get to and never quite had time for, because the show consumed so much of his production energy every year. Ending the new Yankee workshop wasn't retreating from woodworking. It was finally making space to do it on his own terms, for himself and his family, without cameras or deadlines or the accumulated pressure of being the entire foundation of a major television production. On October 16, 2009, WGBH Boston made the announcement officially. No further episodes of the new Yankee workshop would be produced. There was no farewell special, no final episode with a ribbon tied around it, no dramatic goodbye. It ended the way Norm had always worked, quietly, without unnecessary ceremony, and with everything already said that needed to be said. And when that quiet decision finally became public, how did millions of loyal viewers react to losing something they thought would always be there? The fan reaction and what it revealed. The announcement landed like a genuine shock, even to those who followed the show closely. It wasn't that fans had been expecting the show to run forever. Most long-running television programs end eventually. What caught people off guard was the absence of warning signs. No declining quality, no rumors of behind-the-scenes trouble, no final season that felt like a farewell. The show had simply been doing what it always did, and then it stopped. Message boards and woodworking forums lit up within hours of the announcement. Fine Woodworking magazine, which had covered the show throughout its entire run, reported that reader response was unlike anything they had seen in response to a television news story. People weren't just sad about losing a program. They were writing the kind of messages you write when you lose something that had been genuinely woven into the rhythm of your life. Veteran woodworkers credited the show with rekindling a passion they'd almost let go. Beginners described how Norm's patient instruction had given them the confidence to attempt their first real project. Teachers wrote about students who had come to woodworking specifically because of what they had seen on Saturday morning television. Parents described watching episodes with their children, and those children, now adults, wrote about still remembering which projects they had watched together. The depth of the response revealed something that the ratings numbers had always suggested but never quite captured. The new Yankee workshop had not just entertained people. It had genuinely shaped how they spent their time, what they valued, and how they thought about the act of making something with their hands. That is a rare thing for any television show to accomplish, and rarer still for one that operated without drama, scandal, or self-promotion of any kind. What the fan reaction also made clear was that no one was angry. There was grief, but it was the kind of grief that comes with respect. People understood, even if they hadn't known the specific details of Norm's physical situation, that he had given what he had to give. The show had received more from him than most television productions receive from anyone. Asking for more would have been unreasonable, and the audience largely seemed to know that. But beyond the shock and the goodbye, what did the new Yankee workshop actually leave behind after 21 years? What the show left behind. The legacy of the new Yankee workshop is difficult to fully measure, in part because it worked so quietly and asked so little attention for itself.
Of these safety glasses in every household in the country, and for not only the adults, but for the children.
It did not dominate headlines. It did not generate cultural controversy or become the subject of think pieces. It just showed up every Saturday for 21 seasons and taught people how to build things. And somewhere in that consistency, it changed how a generation thought about craft, skill, and the value of making something with your own hands. The 235 projects Norm built on screen remain as relevant today as the day they were filmed. Shaker furniture, Windsor chairs, blanket chests and bookcases, and Chippendale mirrors. These are not dated styles. They are classic forms that endure because they are honest, built without ornamentation that hides poor joinery, designed to last for generations rather than impress for a season. Norm didn't just teach people how to build those pieces, he taught people why those pieces were worth building. That is a different and more lasting kind of education. The show's project plans, measured drawings available for purchase throughout the run, gave viewers a direct path from watching to doing. Thousands of people built Norm's exact projects in their own shops, following the same dimensions and techniques demonstrated on screen. Some of those pieces are now in their second generation of family ownership, real objects, in real homes, that exist because a man on a PBS program took the time to show how they were made. In January 2023, more than 13 years after the show ended, Russell Morash announced that all episodes were now available to watch for free on YouTube. The response was immediate. A new generation of viewers found the show as if for the first time. People in their 20s and 30s discovering Norm Abram and responding with the same quiet admiration every generation before them had. Comments read like letters of gratitude. People describing staying up until 2 in the morning watching episodes. People ordering their first set of chisels after a single build. People saying it was the most calming content they had found on the internet. The show had been off the air for over a decade, and it was still doing what it had always done, making people want to go make something. Season 21 itself is worth a mention. Rather than building new projects, it revisited the best work from earlier seasons, with Norm recording fresh introductions for each. A quiet way to close. Very much in character. And after walking away from something that defined his life for decades, what did Norm Abram choose to do next? What came after? Ending the new Yankee workshop didn't mean the end of Norm Abram. He continued on This Old House, where his role as master carpenter was far more sustainable. Instead of carrying an entire production, he contributed his expertise, advising, demonstrating, and appearing in a supporting role. It allowed him to stay connected to both the craft and the audience without the same physical demands. For the first time in years, he also had space to focus on his own projects. His timber-framed colonial home in Carlisle, Massachusetts, a house he had built himself, still had details he'd never had time to finish. Now, without camera schedules or deadlines, he could return to woodworking on his own terms. Quieter, slower, personal. He wrote as well, continuing the same clear, practical teaching style that defined his television work. In 2016, he appeared in Felled, a documentary about giving new life to fallen urban trees, a natural extension of how he had always viewed wood, not just as material, but as something with history and meaning. Then, in 2022, after more than 4 decades on television, Norm officially retired from This Old House. The send-off matched everything about him. Quiet, respectful, and without spectacle. Even now, the workshop still stands, and Norm still visits from time to time. Not to film, not to perform, just to build. So when you step back and look at the full story, what does it really say about why the new Yankee workshop had to end? The reason the new Yankee workshop ended is pretty simple. Norm Abram gave that show everything he had for 21 years. No extra noise or trying to be the star of the moment. And when his body started tapping him on the shoulder like, "Yeah, we're done here," he actually listened. There was no big emotional send-off or dragging it out for one more season. He just stepped away and kept doing his thing, building, fixing, creating, just without the cameras all up in his business. And honestly, that says a lot. While everyone else is chasing attention, Norm built a whole career by just being good at what he does. Quietly, consistently, with zero drama. The funny part is, his influence didn't go anywhere. It's still there in every clean cut, every solid piece of furniture, every person who actually takes their time to do things right. So, if this story stuck with you, go ahead and subscribe. There are plenty more stories like this coming, and some of them just as quietly iconic.